Thanks for everyone for coming today. So as Lovey mentioned, I'm usually all about Android and I'm a Google developer expert in Android, but I'm going to talk today about something that can be applied to any platform, no matter what you do. I'm going to talk about technical blogging. So this is something that I do quite a lot, and it's what helped me become a GDE. And I think it's something that's a really good skill to have, and something that anybody can take on, no matter what type of technology you're working with or where you are in your development journey. That works. There we go. So why might you try blogging? It's a low-stress way of creating content and sharing your knowledge. You don't have to get up here in front of everybody. You don't have to remember things in your head. You can do it at home, in your cave, under the blankets if you really want to. You don't have to stress about it. You can take as much time as you need, and no public speaking requirement. You can do exactly the same thing as you would for a talk, but if talking and speaking in public is not for you, try blogging and give that a go. It can give you a 2 for the price of 1 when you are writing a talk as well. So often when I'm writing a talk, I might write 1 or 2 blogs to go along with it, because I've already done the work for creating the code. I've already done all the thinking behind it. I've already thought about how I'm going to take my listeners or my readers along on a story. So I might as well just write it down. Often it can be at the same time as I'm preparing the talk. So you end up with like 2 or 3 bits of content for the same amount of thinking and preparation time. Same goes for if you have prepared a technical blog, you can then turn it into a talk pretty easily. It gives you something to share in the future. So often people come to me and say, oh, how do I make something edge to edge? Or how do I do this other technical thing? And I can say, oh, I've written a blog for that. Here, read that. And then I can go back to doing what I was doing rather than having to step them through the same process. So if there's a question that people keep coming to you all the time to ask, maybe that's a really good thing to write down and share with them. It's also something to share with your future self. The number of times I've Googled something and got my own blog post in response is really scary. I'm like, oh yeah, I did know how to do that one day. And then I have to go and read my blog post to remember how. And it really helps if you'd like to become a GDE or another type of developer relations person, or if you want to get a promotion or a new job, being able to point to something and say, I wrote this in your resume is really impactful. And it gives somebody who's evaluating you the opportunity to think, oh, they've been able to come up with a logical argument. They've been able to write something really well. They're good at their code. It can really, really help. And it's something I look for when I'm hiring people. So there are lots of blog posts out there on all sorts of technical topics. This is just a sampling from one day when I was looking at Medium. Lots of interesting things. And I've written quite a few myself on all sorts of different topics, mostly Android, a few not. Lots of people write ones to be a bit controversial or compare different things and share the latest news. How to make money when being a developer or software engineer. How to get new jobs or how to improve your career. And companies use it to share new knowledge or talk about their latest releases. So there is so much out there already. And you might think to yourself, how can I write something new? But you're not an expert. And who wants to spend time reading something that you've written? And what if you get something wrong? Always a big scary thing. Does this seem really overwhelming? The little secret is I ask all of these questions too. And I think anybody here who's also written blogs would have exactly the same thoughts. Everybody feels the same way. And it's just a matter of getting over that and giving it a try. And you'll see how easy it is. So like anything else, it begins with that first step. So you need to firstly craft it. You've got to come up with that first step. What do you want to write about? So it could be something that you're excited that you've been working on. You might have been playing around with something in your personal time or at work. You're really excited about it. That's a good topic. It could be a cool new technology. Maybe there's something you've seen or read about. You think it's really exciting, want to be the first out there. Could be a bug or a problem that you have solved. Something you've been working on and really diving deep. Or something you've Googled recently This is often my inspiration. I Google something, I find a Stack Overflow post or another blog post. I think, oh, that's kind of what I want, but not completely. So I'll then go write a blog post about it once I've solved my problem. And it's a really great way of thinking of, if I'm Googling it, somebody else would be as well. So you need to make it interesting. You could have a problem and a solution. You could do a deep dive in technology. One of the blog posts I'm going to talk about in a bit is one I've written recently, where I just picked one API and delved really deep into it. You could compare two things. You know, why is ChatGPT better than Gemini or vice versa? Or why is Kotlin better than Java? You could have a step-by-step guide, how to integrate something. That's pretty straightforward. You could share your opinion, why you like using something, why you don't like using something, or why you would prefer a particular approach. Lists are always good as well. You know, top 5 things to do when you're integrating this particular API, or what things to look for in a resume. But most of all, you want to tell a story. So have a beginning, a middle, and an end, so that you can make sure you take your user on that, your reader on that story. So some tips for topics. Single topic and single idea is best. So if you think that you're starting to get multiple topics, your blog post is getting longer and longer, stop and split it up into several pieces. Smaller is better. It makes it easier for you to write, easier for you to organize your thoughts. You get more content if you have to split it out. And also it's easier for people to parse it and be able to find the message that you're trying to say. No more than a 6-minute read. It's a bit hard to tell how long a blog post is to read. If you use Medium, it will actually tell you how long it is to read. You want to keep it short. And consider a blog series, as I mentioned. Break it up if you can. You know, go through each part separately. Part 1, part 2, part 3. It's a really good way of doing it. It doesn't need to be an advanced topic. People think, oh, I really need to show the most advanced thing here and, you know, the real deep dive. A lot of the time, people just want to hear, you know, how to get started with something and how would you, as maybe a junior developer, use a particular piece of technology. You don't need to be advanced. You don't need to be an expert. People want to hear about your opinion. So don't forget to include your personality and your point of view. Otherwise, people could just read the documentation. You want to hear about why you liked using this, the pitfalls that you observed, the solutions that you found. And so that's what differentiates you and why people might want to read your blog post over just reading the documentation. So the real first step for me, I mean, getting the topic, you sort of already have that if you're going to sit down and write a blog post, is crafting that title. So there's usually a title and subtitle. So you want to consider how you would search for the content, because that's what's going to come up in the search results. You don't want to go super clickbaity. I've seen people put, you know, this thing is amazing, and then they don't really talk about it at all. But you want to attract readers. So I think it's a fine line between having something that's clickbaity that people might actually want to click versus actually saying what the blog post is about. So one method is the title should be the what and the subtitle should be the why. So, you know, building something with, how to build an Android app to surprise and delight your users, sort of thing. There's lots of different ways you can think of this. Another way is a title could be something fun, but the subtitle should be really clear. You'll see in a moment one of my blog posts, I went with .-design because it sounded really cool, and then how to build lines in Jetpack Compose with Path Effect. Much more boring, but it was clearly saying what was in the blog post. So coming up with the title is, you know, you can do that. Often also the first paragraph, just to try and get your reader into the blog post, and helps you write it as well. And this is usually the hardest part for me. I'll tell you a few secrets of what I do. So we've got Bard and ChatGPT to the rescue. Why not? So not ChatGPT because we're at Google, and not Bard because now Gemini. So Gemini to the rescue. Got to keep up. So if I'm starting a post, I might use Gemini to come up with a title because I struggle with it and I want some options. So for one of the ones I was writing about, title for a blog post about styling lines in Jetpack Compose. It gave me a whole bunch of different options. I wanted to use that Morse code metaphor because my lines are going to have lots of dots and dashes. So I asked for some variations with Morse code in it. I wanted something a bit shorter, so iterated on that. And I really like that dash design, line style mastery. I didn't quite like that. So then I tweaked that myself. So I changed a bit myself and came up with dash design, mastering lines, and Jetpack Compose with Path Effect. And that's what I went with. And so by using generative AI for inspiration and then tweaking it myself, it felt more authentically me, but I got that bit of inspiration that I needed. So here we have in the start part, dash design, interesting and fun. Doesn't actually describe what I'm doing. Mastering lines, that's the why. We're mastering them. We want to be able to be really good at writing them and building them. In Jetpack Compose, purely for SEO and to tell people what they're actually going to see. And with Path Effect. So this is the API I was specifically looking at. So it's the key technology. So it's so much easier to write when you've got that title. You know how you're going to continue from there. If it comes naturally from here, then just start writing. Just take out start typing, you're good to go. But if it doesn't come naturally to you, you can try starting from the middle. Just start writing anywhere. It doesn't have to be the very start of the blog post. What I like to do is add my code examples and then start explaining them, like write the stuff that leads into that code example and what comes out after it, and then gradually just fill in the gaps from there. You can also get help from AI and you can replace it later. So however you start, you want to find your writing voice. And that's what makes the blog post sound interesting, and it's not just boring documentation. So I usually find my voice with that first paragraph. In this case, I tried Gemini again. So give me an opening paragraph to a blog post about drawing edge to edge with Jetpack Compose. Gave me a few options: techy, informative, playful, engaging, intriguing, mysterious. This is where we're talking about the voice. You want to think about how you want to sound. So this is where you need to choose. And so I did pick a few for this particular blog post, but I modified them myself to make them more me. I just took some of the ideas. And this one as well, I actually got the subtitle from this one as well. And a little secret with this as well, I often scrap this AI version once I've written the rest of the article. And I did that with one of the ones I did recently. I came up with a blog with an opening paragraph from generative AI, finished writing the article, read the first paragraph, and was like, that's not what I'm talking about at all. Just deleted it. But it gave me that chance to start. And at least I was not looking at a blank page. I was looking at a page that already had some text on it. So I felt like I'd started. And often it doesn't feel like it's authentic and doesn't match the rest of it. But it gets you started. So you need to find your voice. How can you go about doing that? Do you want to be strictly informative, fun or dry? Do you want to be controversial? You can use words like I, we, you. You can use past tense, present tense, future tense. Sounds a lot like an English lesson, right? But it's really, what do you like to read? When you're reading a blog post, what makes sense to you? And how would you explain something to somebody else? So what kind of words and what kind of language do you use if you're explaining to somebody who's just sitting next to you? So what things do I prefer? So I usually go with a conversational tone. That's what I like to have, like I would be talking to someone next to me. And I use words like we and you, like we can integrate this API by doing this, or the next step you need to follow is something else. And I usually use a present tense. It sounds more active. Just depends what you feel like. But the most important thing is consistency. So many times, especially if people have used generative AI to write part of their blog posts, not consistent. Just make sure it's consistent, whatever way you choose. So you can find your voice with the first paragraph, and then you actually have to start your content all the way down there. So a warning, as I've mentioned, don't write all your content using AI. You can really, really tell. I've seen it more and more recently reading blog posts. I'm like, this is written by AI. This is written by AI. This is written by like 4 different AIs and they all sound different. So you can use it as inspiration and then modify and iterate yourself. Now comes the part about coding it. This is what the actual content's about. So tips for writing the actual content. As I mentioned before, write out the headings first, remember the beginning, middle, and end. So lead your reader through a pathway. Start with very basic example, move to slightly more complex, and then finish with the final example with everything working. Create those code examples and fill in around them. And don't be afraid to add your experiences and your opinions and your failures as well. Like you could even put code in there. I tried this, it didn't work. See how many people copy that and then try it without actually reading the rest of it? It's amazing. And if you can, share your source code link. Create a dummy project on GitHub with the basics there, and then people can go and grab that if they want to. And if you don't know something, share it. So an example I had recently, so this is from a recent blog post. I've got here, you can see, I've got my pointer here. I've shared the GitHub link up here. And this section down here, in my Path Effect blog post, I completely decided not to explain one of the APIs because I could not even use it myself. I could not find a good example for it anywhere. I tried. So I just said, I am not going to explain this because I don't know. And I might have a part 2 one day that includes more information about this particular API. But it's totally okay just to say that. People will respect that. They might even comment and say, here's a great example that you can go have a look at. So also, don't try using big words and flowery language. And that brings me to language and grammar. Make use of the tools you have available to you. So things like spell check, definitely spell check. Also things like Grammarly, other tools like that it will read what you've written and then give you some suggestions. Ask a friend or a colleague to pre-read it for you. It's a really easy thing to do. Keep it simple and easy to read. It's better than sounding like really smart if you're using lots of big words and complicated language. People are much more going to enjoy your blog post if it's simple and easier to read. So don't be stressed, especially if English is not your first language. Just take your time and iterate on it, make it nice and simple, because think somebody else who might have the same level of English as you might be reading it as well. So you don't need to sound smart by using fancy words. As I said, take your time. Nobody gets it right the first time. I usually just write random paragraphs and then I go back and edit them later. You can always do that. You can do it 1,000,000 times. Nobody will ever know. So what about images? Picture is worth 1,000 words. So some of the images you can use are screenshots of UI. If you've built something, take some screenshots. You can have diagrams, stock images, AI-generated images. Some examples of these I've used. So here's some screenshots. So I've got here just like a basic app that I built, just taking a screenshot from my watch UI. And I've got my lines there that I was using in that blog post. Diagrams, use a diagramming tool to have a nice flow diagram. Stock images. This one was from a blog post I wrote about dependency management. Very boring and dry. So I decided the fun picture of a garden would be nice. Or AI-generated images. This one was for a blog post I was writing about text, and I thought I'll have a go at this. Surprisingly hard to make AI-generated image that has a word in it. So this took me a lot more time than I ever thought. But I really like it now. That was actually from Adobe. So some key considerations when you're thinking about images. Ensure you're allowed to use the images. So they need to be royalty-free. And high quality is always really good. A number of times I see blog posts where they've got something really grainy and you're like, why did you include that in the first place? People are looking at this on a high quality screen. You need to consider the feature image and the search thumbnail dimensions. So if you have a look at Medium or a lot of other blog platforms, they have a certain feature image dimension. And then when it gets ingested by search or social media, it's again a different dimension. So have a think about where your blog post is going to appear and how you can construct an image that has the right construction to fit in those dimensions. Ensure you attribute all images. Even if I get an image that does not require attribution, I try to do that. Just because I think if I was somebody who'd taken a photo and was like kind enough to share it, royalty free, I'd like to be attributed, so wherever possible, do that, especially if it's from documentation as well. Definitely add the link of where you got it. That way also, if for some reason that image changes or becomes out of date, at least people can say, oh, here, I can go find the right one. Losslessly compress your images. Some platforms will take care of this for you, but I actually had a blog post rejected because from a publisher because I hadn't compressed my images and they were just taking forever to load. And they actually said, "Oh, you're missing all your images," and it was just that they were so high quality that they were taking forever. So I recommend compress them, reduce the size if you can, in a way that's still high quality, but not including extra information you don't need. And minimize GIFs that you're only using for amusement. Like I've seen so many where people have, cat GIFs and explosion GIFs and all sorts of things. A lot of them are, this is fine, flames GIF. Think about why you're including that GIF. Make sure it's only there for the blog post and it makes sense. People are just going to scroll past them and they're distracting for people to read. So really think about why you're including it. You could maybe include one or two if there's a real reason for it. So screenshot and demos are always really good, especially for UI animations. So for this particular example, I was doing a blog post on pull to refresh, again, quite boring. So I thought, oh, I'll make something fun when everybody pulls to refresh, and there's fox pictures. I found an API that just generates pictures of foxes. It made me happy to code it, makes people happy to read it, and I like it. They're really cute. So if you have your screen recording or your video, you can then convert it to a GIF. And then resize and compress it. So I usually go to around 360 pixels just because that fits nicely because I mostly write on medium and I think on a laptop, that's a nice size. But make sure that you don't include the full size one because it will just means the user has to scroll past it. And try and only choose the section that is important. In this example, I might not have included the bottom section because it really isn't important. What's important is the top part that is got the little refresh icon and where you can see the user's pointer moving. And if you can, make them fun and eye-catching. And compression, reducing the frame rate. I think this is one of the higher quality versions, but I do have a lower quality one that actually is the one that I put in the blog post just because it was so huge and I wanted to make sure that it would load quickly. Some free tool recommendations, images, Unsplash, Free Pick are really good. Icons, I use the material symbol and icons a lot. The noun project is really useful. A lot of those you're required to attribute, but that's totally fine. Image editing, I use Photopea. It's a web-based client, super lightweight, easy to use. You can pay for it if you want to, but it's ad supported otherwise. Excalidraw is like a sketchy diagramming tool. I really like that one as well. Draw.io, Figma, of course, Miro, there's one called Mermaid. Google Slides. I've even done stuff in Google Slides and then just copy and pasted that out into an image. Works really well. For GIF editing, I use easygif.com. That is like so good, so easy to use. Yeah, really good if you have no actual video editing experience. And image lossless compression, I use ImageOptim, which is just a program you can run, drag things in, and it outputs losslessly compressed images. So feature images, you want something that's eye-catching for search engines. Yeah, you want people to click on your blog post. Set the mood at the top of the article. What are people likely to see? You want it to kind of be related to the blog post. Sometimes they're not, but think about why you're including that particular image. It can be a GIF, but just be aware that sometimes when pulling this on search, you'll just get the first frame. So make sure the actual first frame of the GIF is, okay. Think about that platform aspect ratio. So Medium, for example, is 630 by 120. Sorry, 1200. Make sure you get that right rectangular size. You can also adjust the focal point to improve your social media or search cropping. On Medium, you press Option and click in the image. It will adjust the focal point. But this means when it doesn't crop, it will crop on a certain part of the image. So if you've got something that's a different shape, you can select the right part. Something to play around with. Some of my examples, I did one about grayscaling images in Jetpack Compose. So this little grayscale rows just to set the mood. For one about preview parameters, I just use a straight screenshot of the annotations because it made sense. And for that pull to refresh one, I used a really cute picture of a fox with the pull to refresh icon on it because I liked looking at it. That one did really well too. So code examples, it's a technical blog, so this is the most important thing. What are you trying to show is the question you need to ask yourself. You want it to be minimal and to the point. If I had all of this code, you might just sort of scan through it and not understand what was going on. So I can reduce it and just say, oh, I just care about part of that. And then again, I can add some, little dots in there so that I'm hiding the extra part. So I can tell the reader that, there is some stuff here, but it's not really important to my example. If they want the full thing, they can go to GitHub. Be really specific and clear with your naming. So here in the file name, I'm using GitHub Gists here. I've said this file is called lines.kt. I probably in a real life example wouldn't include a file called lines. I probably would be something like line drawing components, or I don't know, it would be something else. But for my example, I just want to be really clear so people know where this might live. If it was something that was to be in an activity, I would make sure it's in a file saying like main activity. Something like that, just so they know that, oh, this code should be in a service, so it should be in UI code, should be in backend code. Be specific with your function naming and your variable naming. People don't have when they're reading your blog post, they don't have the context. So go with really simple names, describe the code, and try and avoid the abbreviations. So many times I see somebody's used the word like A, and then they've referred to it later on. I'm like, well, what is that? It's better if they say it is, path 1 or something. It's a little bit easier to understand. And make sure you're using argument names if your language allows it, so that when you're passing in a whole bunch of parameters, people reading it can say, okay, so now I know that this needs to match to this parameter. Because sometimes you can reorder things in different IDEs and you might not actually notice when you're putting that code in the blog post. And then somebody's trying to copy your code later and they're like, oh, the API's changed and I don't know which this should match to, especially if it's a whole bunch of Booleans. Definitely tell the user what each one's for. Show a journey. So start with step 1, step 2, step 3. Formatting is really important. I recommend GitHub Gists for something that's over like 2 or 3 lines because you get that formatting and it's much easier for the user to see. So for example, you also want to avoid what I've highlighted here where I've got like a function that's heading off the edge of the screen. If I had this in a blog post, you'd still be able to scroll to see it, but it's really jarring for the user to have to do that. Also have a look at the indentation. So here, I've actually adjusted this to use only a 2-space indentation rather than the usual like 4 or more, just because to avoid having this as much as possible. So you might need to adjust your code when you paste it into Gists or into your blog writing tool, but try and format it as best you can. Use backticks for inline code and code keywords. It can really help so that if people are wondering why are you using a particular term, or you can say, actually, that's the API variable name, or specifically like DPM picks there. Here's some objects as well. You can see here, like this is like 2 lines. So I might include this in backticks, but it is kind of harder to read, especially as I've like left it as one big line. It would be better if I like added multiple lines here. So you can always include that GitHub link as well. That way people can go and find the full example when they're like, I don't know where this piece of code exists in the whole scheme of things. So definitely do that. Attribution, not just for images. You can use other people's work as your inspiration. That's totally okay. But link to them if you can. So link to official docs or other blogs that you've used to solve that problem. So if you've read this somewhere, credit that person and say how your blog post that you're writing is different to theirs. Maybe you've made it simpler. Maybe you've gone the next step. Or maybe just showing an alternative way. And consider what you would want if someone used your work. Think about how you might feel. And when in doubt, attribute. I've also considered attributing my use of AI, especially when I'm doing AI images or AI code. I'm thinking about it at the moment. At the moment, I'm just attributing images that I've generated with AI, just to kind of let people know that I did not take this myself. It has come from a particular AI tool. We'll see where this lands in the future as AI becomes more and more part of our lives. Some examples. So this particular graph I pulled from the Google Developer Docs. So I've just attributed it in a caption. Or for my API, for those Fox images, I've just included a link so people can go find it if they want. Another example is like the code was inspired by a Stack Overflow post. Another one here where I've specifically called it an author who wrote a really cool heart path. I didn't want to rewrite it myself, so just called her out and said that her blog post was great. Another one here, this was quite an interesting one. I found an idea from a Stack Overflow post and answer. I credited the person and explained that I was taking it to the next level because what they had used was out of date. That person then actually found my blog post and commented on it and said, thanks for the attribution. So it was a nice little circle there. And so now you can conquer it, the finishing touches. Review, review, review. And spell check, definitely spell check. Grammar check, I mentioned Grammarly before. Ask your friends or colleagues to review. A lot of tools like Medium, you can send a draft link to somebody and then they can actually comment on that and let you know, or you could just sit next to somebody and get them to read it and they can step you through what they like. I always recommend sleep on it. Review it one more time and then post it. So many times I finished it, it's usually like 12:30 at night and I'm like, yeah, it's done, I'll push publish. And then the next morning I reread it and go, oh, what was I thinking? So I really recommend to sleep on it. The next day you might reread it and think, oh, actually, it would make more sense if this section was before this other section, or I need to add another bit of explanation here. And just one night, you just have to sleep on it. How you might go about building an audience to find those readers, get those clicks. Can you add it to a publication? I usually publish my blog posts, I publish them on Medium, but I publish them under Pro Android Dev because that's what my readers are reading. If I published under my own name or under my company's name, I'm not sure it would rate as highly in the search results. And also, a lot of people sign up to various publications and get the digests from them. Can you get picked up by a newsletter or a digest? Android Weekly comes out every week. I know follow Pro Android Dev. Some of my posts have appeared in Android Weekly. Those ones do really, really well. So if you can get picked up by a newsletter that is applicable for your platform, it's a really good way of doing it. So you might need to investigate what newsletters are out there, read them yourselves, and see what publications are available and what the rules are for publishing in them. You can make use of platform tools like SEO and keywords, thinking about that title again, how you might put the abstract there, what hot topics are around, what keywords you can use. Make sure you share it on social media. LinkedIn, of course, Twitter or X, Reddit, and share it on Slack. So in our GDG Australia and New Zealand Slack, we have a showcase channel. You can jump in there, just say, this is what I've been working on recently. It'll get you some readers, and you might get some feedback, or might get somebody saying, oh, I'm working on something similar to you. Shall we collaborate? And you can interact with your audience via the comments. Both on social media and in the blog post, respond to people. A lot of the time, people might point out something you've done incorrectly. You can say, great, thanks for letting me know, I'll fix it. Or I did it this way for a reason. It's totally okay. And if somebody leaves a comment that you don't like, feel free to delete it or ignore it. They're not stopping you. So which platform to choose? Where are your readers reading? For me, Android developers, other software developers, Medium is where it's at. But I know that there are other ones for other platforms. And how can you boost your search ranking? What gets picked up? I know some people like to put their blog posts in their personal domain on their personal website. That's a good thing too, but make sure that your website is being crawled by the search bots. Make sure that people can actually find your content. Can you make use of those publication digests? And where is it easy for you to write? So I write directly in the compose part of Medium, just because it makes sense to me. I did start writing on Google Docs and then copying it across, but I found I was spending more time fiddling with the formatting and redoing it. Like I sort of had to do it once and then a second time when I actually put it into Medium. So for me, that was really disjointed. I know a lot of people who write them in Markdown, and then you can upload them to a website that supports Markdown. But whatever's easy for you to write. And make sure the platform you choose does have all those features you need, like code embedding, the SEO support, image hosting, so you don't have to worry about all that stuff. You've gone to the effort of writing content, don't worry about fiddling around with web. Consider the longevity and the content ownership. So this is something I'm kind of worried about. Maybe Medium might die and all my content will go out the window. So I've taken to exporting my content frequently. I'm also considering maybe I could also host this on my website as well. But it's something to think about depending on what kind of content you're writing. And is it something you want to make money from? I personally don't want to get money for my content because it really irritates me when I hit a paywall for somebody else. So I feel like I can't do the reverse. And also the publication I write for, you have to have your articles for free. So have a think about whether you want to make money from your blog posts. I also believe that you don't get very much money, at least from Medium. I think it's like a couple of cents. So to me, I feel that I'd rather make it free and those couple of cents elsewhere. So a word of warning. Writing a blog post does take way longer than expected. So I wrote one as I was writing this talk, the one about the lines, just so I had some examples that I could speak to. And I thought, oh yeah, I'll knock this over within an hour, no problem. It took about 4 or 5 hours to do. I mean, I was kind of writing the talk at the same time, but it's all in like the formatting. It's all in these little things like code examples, getting them all aligned correctly, finding that image, like spending ages trying to find something that's royalty free that you can use. It's all those little tiny things that take the time. So while it is good to just start writing and think you can get over with quickly, all these things take up your time. But the good thing is that once you've done it a few times, they get easier and easier and quicker. So it means that you just have to come up with the content next time. You already know how to do everything else. So you can hit that big publish button and you'll be all good. Any questions? Zach?
Got more of a comment.
Okay.
With the rights to images, you can go on Google, at least you can go 3 dots and then usage rights and open source, or what's it called?
Copyright free or
Copyright free.
royalty free.
And that might make it a bit easier, but it's still hard to find a good image.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Yep.
I often fall into the trap where I want to show something, of course, as an example, but then it's actually a wrong way of doing things. And then I want to show right way of doing things. But then when someone is reading and they're trying to find the wrong thing in the sample, they wouldn't really find it because it was wrong anyway. So I think sometimes that if I could add it maybe in a comment, previous comment. But again, that is so difficult. So how do I make sure?
So if you're putting it in the blog post, usually what I would do in that case is add comments about the lines, like this line doesn't work or this line doesn't produce the example. And if you're putting in a GitHub example as well, have 2 functions. One's called the wrong way, one's called the right way. And I also have lots of variations, like even step 1, step 2, step 3, and you might have them in artificial functions with copied code. Example code bases never look how you actually would do it in real life, but at least somebody reading it can say, okay, this is where you started, this is the next step, and they can comment and uncomment the code as they see fit.
Thank you.
Yes, sir?
Yeah.
Yeah. But you know how you don't really commit that, and then you realize it later once you've already created it. Oh, I should have shown that mistake.
Sometimes I've gone back and rewritten the examples to show the mistake. It's never organic. It's always contrived examples. And look, I'm going to type the wrong thing in here because usually I've written the code as part of a personal project or part of my work project, but you can never use that code in a blog post because it's too complex.
Yeah.
So you always have to, okay, this example, simplify, contrive the examples that show what you want to show really simply. So it's always a case of rewriting it, and definitely something to do if you have got like client code or other protected code that you don't want to share. You can just rewrite it with a equivalent example.
But thank you. I'm going to look at my code and see if I committed that don't change.
Any other questions or thoughts?
Yeah, I'm going to be controversial. So
go for it.
Considering it does take so long
Mhm.
to write posts, and obviously it's not just one, you're trying to write a series of posts all that time. And obviously everyone's quite sure. Why? Because there's the kind of 4 or 5 hours you can do something else really productive. learn a tool or, tutorial, so how do you make that decision that, that's the most valuable thing that you can do that 45 hours, how do you help someone else?
And I think that's an excellent question. And it's one that I often struggle with myself when I'm like, I've got so many things to do. What should I do first? For me, I'm a GDE. So my status as a GDE is based on knowledge sharing. So giving this talk to you all tonight is very much part of it, as is the blog posts. So if I stop doing blog, so it's not a direct relation, but it helps me in my job and, maintaining my level of, where I am professionally. And it can help you get, new roles as well. Whereas learning a tool that, that also might help. So it depends on where you're looking to go, what type of person you are as well. I'm a person who likes helping other people. Lovey mentioned before, I mentor as well. I do speaker mentoring, I do talks, all sorts of things that I like sharing my knowledge and making sure other people know exciting new things. So for me, it's a really good way of doing that I can do from home. It completely depends on what you want to do. And I don't think it's for everybody. It's just something that I found quite useful. And it's really good when you're applying for jobs because you can just show it rather than trying to demonstrate your knowledge of a tool.
This is the title. I'm Evangelist.
We're all glad you do this.
Yeah, it's okay. No, it's a very good question. And I think it's something that you need to think about is what you're trying to get out of it. And it's sort of why, again, I don't charge people for reading my blog posts on Medium because I think knowledge should kind of be free. I agree that something should be paid for, but the amount of money that I get from people reading my blog posts is so small compared to the benefits I get from a higher readership. And the other benefits it gives me in my career and, my outside of career life just works for me. I think over here was the question.
How do you decide the final draft of your blog? Like, I have tried it, but it's always a question, like, you can make it better.
So with most platforms, you can go back and edit it. So when you think you've got, that's pretty good. Yeah, it's mostly there. You've done the spell check. There's no grammar issues. You're happy. Just post it. Quite a few of my blog posts, I've gone back and gone, actually, I should have added this paragraph here, and I've gone and changed it. I know that Andreas has even told me about typos, and I've gone and fixed it. You can fix things later if you want to. I've even got some that are now really out of date, and I just added a comment to the top saying, this is out of date. I've left it here for historical purposes, but don't use it, and that's totally fine. I think if you're ready to show somebody else, your colleague or your friend or your parents, my parents have read my blog posts and they have no idea what they're reading, but they say they're lovely. My mum likes the pictures of the foxes, so it's okay. So if you're ready to show it to someone else, it's probably ready to go online. And don't feel afraid if somebody says, oh, you've missed something here. Just say, great, I'll add it. Or I'll add it in part 2, That's totally fine.
Also, is it ideal to post these things on LinkedIn as well? Like, not the whole blog post, like just a part of it, or like how do you?
So what I usually do is I'll say, here's some fun I've been recently having with Jetpack Compose. Well, I might just put a little line about it and then the link to the blog post because you want people to go to that post to read it so they can see it in all its glory. 1 or 2 lines about, why you've decided to write it. I was struggling with this problem at my work yesterday and I found the solution. Here's what I did, something like that. Don't post the actual content in LinkedIn or one of those other platforms because you won't be able to have code. You won't be able to have the images the way you want them. And people won't be able to read the full thing.
Just on that, so if you do a LinkedIn, not the post, but the LinkedIn blog, that's where you can.
Okay, yeah, I don't use it though. I don't use that. I never read them, so I figure if I don't read them, then nobody else is going to read mine. So
keep it in the central and then promote it on whatever other platform.
Yeah.
So promote it on Twitter, promote it on Slack, promote it on.
That way, if you want to edit it as well, you can just go and edit it in one place. Yeah. And with a lot of tools, you can have separate links or analytics links for different platforms, so you can see how well the content does as well if you get really into it.
Is it like major goal when recruiter checks your profile?
I don't necessarily know about recruiters, but as somebody who hires other people, it's 100% something I look for. If I hear somebody's done presentations like this or have written blog posts, I'll go have a look at them. And it's already like a tick in my head that, this is definitely somebody to put to the top of the pile because they're sharing their knowledge. And I'd like that if I'm going to hire them and they're going to be part of my team, I'd like to see them share their knowledge with the person sitting next to them or share the knowledge with the company. So if I can already see they're doing it and they've written it well, they've got a well thought out argument, they've taken the time to look at these little things, I might think, oh, this person must be detail orientated, that's great. Or they've really done a deep dive. That's the type of person I'm looking for. It also really helps when you get into that interview or into that phone screen, and somebody's saying, oh, tell us something about a challenge you've had recently, and you're like, well, I had this problem. If you want the details, you can check my blog post out, and so that sort of shows that you've had a problem, you've solved it, and then you've learnt from it. You've written something up about that problem. You've found some lessons. You've thought it through, and that's really showing what kind of a person you are and your capabilities. You can definitely talk to that if you haven't got any written content, but just being able to point to something is really useful as well. Just gives you that extra dimension. Any other questions?
Okay, what do you recommend for someone who was starting out in blog posting? Would you say that it's more important to be consistent or to make sure what you're putting out there is of the highest quality possible?
I think consistency is important. Quality has lots of different measures. So if you could just make something simpler, as a really simple short blog post, but it's consistent, is better than something that's really long and detailed that's not consistent, because it's not easy to read. And remember, there's somebody who's going to be sitting there reading this blog post. And if it's long-winded and got all different tenses everywhere and you've used all sorts of different words. Yeah.
Like posting consistently.
Oh, I see. Posting. Yeah.
Every so often, but you're doing something that's like you spend a lot of time thinking about something.
I don't necessarily think about consistency. I wouldn't go with that in that use of the word, because really not many people, I think, follow individual content creators. You're more likely to follow a publication or just search for the blog post. So I wouldn't really notice if somebody has posted recently, unless they were doing a series on something. So in that case, it's more what can you handle with your regular life and your work. So I kind of have a goal for myself to try and have a blog post once a month. So I do talks as well and lots of other things, plus my full-time job. So I feel that that's enough that I can manage. But for you, it might be once every 3 months, or it might be just get one post out this year. What works for you? There's some people who post every day or every week, and that's great for them. I cannot be that person. But yeah, you need time to think of the examples. You need time to write it out. I think just go for what makes sense to you and what you can produce. Any other questions?
So usually when we write or something like blog, probably we take anything as an particular topic or whatever it is. So after a couple of months or something, it's always get updated versions of it. Right? Like you're taking some time to write this, and after a couple of months, it's always. So how does it motivate you?
Welcome to tech. I think it's something that we all deal with. I even look at code I've written 2 months ago and I'm like, oh, this is old code. And I wrote it myself. It's something, that's what the industry is about. Always things are going to be changing. That's why it's exciting. Spend some time writing on it. If you think it's something that's going to change soon, don't spend a lot of time on it. But as I said, you can always edit something, add a link saying, this is now old, see part 2 here where I've talked about the new stuff. And you get people coming to both blog posts. Any other questions? One more.
You touched on consistency.
Yeah.
How do you stay consistent with your posting?
Frequency?
Yeah.
Purely when I have ideas. I have a little list in Google Keep, I think, with ideas, so that if I'm walking somewhere, I've got an idea, or I'm at one of these events. Often when I'm watching other people's talks, I get ideas on how I can make a blog post. I'll write it in my notes app, and then at least when I feel the mood to write something, I can go and find some ideas. Because you never get the idea and the time at exactly the same time, so it's good to have those little prompts. But yeah, it's just whenever I can fit it in. Get in the mood. Yeah, I usually am, like when I get time, I have like personal project 1, personal project 2, personal project 3, craft project, blogging, learning, exploration. And I'm like, okay, out of all of these things, what is the thing that I want to do right now? And usually TV wins. But when you do have that mood and when you do feel like you're ready to write something or you feel in the zone, just grab it and hold it and write as long as you possibly can. And that's why often I write those code examples and then write around them, because I find that that's easier rather than starting off with a blank page and writing that first paragraph. So whatever you can do to get yourself over that first paragraph really helps. And you'll find it flows a lot better and you feel more in the mood to finish it off. Alrighty. Awesome. Oh, one more.
So when you try to write about something, and when you see the original document from where you learned everything, it becomes like similar every time. Like all the topics are important, all the things are same. So how do you like change it to your own thing? Like
By thinking about why you're writing it to begin with.
yeah,
Like I wouldn't copy what somebody else is doing because what's the point then? But maybe I've found a new way of doing it. So I highlight those parts. And you can always link to, if you want to see the simple explanation, go to this documentation. But if you want to see something complex, come here.
yeah.
So have a think about what parts are the really important parts to you and why you're spending time writing it. And don't just copy and paste from other places, because that's not going to be the way to do it.
Steps,
Yeah.
are quite important.
Yeah, well, then maybe think about what problems you had while completing the steps. You don't need to go through and reiterate the steps again. You can say, I followed these steps on this other blog post. I had these problems, or it gave me these advantages.